The Polikarpov I-16 gained notoriety for being the first low-wing monoplane to enter military service with retractable landing gear and an enclosed cockpit. Though we shall talk about this in a moment, it was built and designed with a fully enclosed cockpit, which was very rare on the front line. The history of the I-16, like many other Soviet technological tales from the 1930s, starts in a Soviet jail. At State Aviation Factory No. 39, Nikolai Polikarpov worked alongside Dmitry Gogorovich and a few other designers of aircraft. Although they also slept, ate and drank there while being armed guards, the word employed may be a bit of a stretch. The Soviet Air Force, or VVS, required the development of several new aircraft. Additionally, Nikolai began developing the I-5, which would eventually become the I-15 biplane in 1929. He was also developing a fighter plane concept for a single aircraft. Additionally, the VVS planned to use both monoplanes and biplanes in its combat squadrons of the future from the start of the 1930s. Although there was still some reluctance to commit entirely to monoplane designs, the military realized that monoplanes were rapidly taking over as the preferred aircraft type. As a result, concept work on the first I-16 prototype was started in 1932, and construction on the actual aircraft started in June 1933. It had a combination of the old and the new, just like many other aircraft from the era. However, it was both a radical and revolutionary improvement above earlier aircraft designs in different respects. Its wooden monocoque fuselage resembled a barrel and was covered with fabric. This was a conventional beginning, more because of Russia's inability to mass-produce all-metal aircraft at the time than a lack of creativity in the design. The wood frame helped Polikarpov achieve his goal of keeping the aircraft as light as possible, but he also planned for it to be only 20 feet long in order to further reduce weight. It featured a huge tail fin at the back and a large radial engine at the front. Its small stature and sturdy build would later lead to it being referred to as Ishak, which means donkey. Additionally, it provided it with an unconventional center of gravity, which would result in some intriguing stability improvements. Originally, the aircraft was supposed to be fitted with two 7.62mm Shkars machine guns positioned on the wings. Still, several test pilots would argue that this armament was too light right from the start. Unfortunately, it was a problem that would remain unresolved until battle reports validated their claims that the prototype included some more cutting-edge characteristics in addition to the conventional components. It was regarded as a true invention since its landing gear could be retracted up into the wings, significantly improving aerodynamics in a world still dominated by fixed-wing aircraft. The only drawback was that the pilot had to manually crank the gear to raise it. It also had a fully enclosed glass canopy with a slidable back panel for the pilot's convenient exit. Regretfully, the canopy would perform poorly in actual use. Large ailerons that extended nearly the whole trailing edge of the wing were another feature of the prototype. The glazing was frequently of extremely low quality and was reportedly a nightmare to maintain clean, leading many pilots to choose to replace it with the short windscreen that is frequently associated with the I-16 today. These ailerons could droop at a 15-degree angle and be used as flaps as well. This is said to have been the ancestor of flaperons as we know them today. On December 30th, 1933, the first I-16 prototype, known as the TSKB-12, made its airborne debut. It was intended to be powered by a license-built Wright Cyclone radial engine. The decision was made to install the M22 engine, which is a license-built variant of the Bristol Jupiter engine, since obtaining approval was taking longer than anticipated. Eventually, the Cyclone engine was also installed in a prototype, and the two were compared. This started a trend where different engines were added to an ever-widening range of I-16s throughout its development cycle. Good news was received during the initial trials, and the aircraft's good maneuverability was appreciated. But it also showed some rather horrifying instability in response to abrupt control input. After extensive testing, it was discovered that while the aircraft could easily wing stall with an abrupt control input, it could also recover from these situations on its own, as long as the power was maintained and the pilots maintained their stick in the neutral position. 1934 saw the start of full service trials for the I-16, and that same year saw the delivery of the first I-16 type prototypes. The prototypes had left an impression on Stalin, who even gave them permission to fly over Red Square. Because Cyclone engines vibrated the airplane, pilots preferred the M22 engine, which powered these early variants. Due to its intricate mechanical design, the manually retractable landing gear had a tendency to jam, an issue that could only be resolved in the air by the pilot exerting significant physical force. In particular, this posed a serious risk if you ever intended to land again. Additionally, the prototypes would frequently fly with their landing gear shut down to prevent any potential lethal accidents, even though it was eventually substantially improved in later generations. The Type 4, which continued to use the M22 engine, was the first iteration of the I-16 to go into full production. Notwithstanding the pilot's grievances with the Cyclone engine, a third prototype, a replica of the Cyclone, was created utilizing the newly licensed M25. The I-16 Type 5 was the outcome of this. To make room for this new engine, the Type 5 had a revised exhaust system, cooling and control shutters, and a whole new engine cowling. The extra pilot armor from the I-16 Type 4 was also transferred to the aircraft, with a peak speed of 454 km/h and a weight of only 1,460 kilograms. The Type 5 was the world's lightest and fastest production fighter when it went into service. During the Spanish Civil War in November 1936, the Type 5 and the even lighter and more powerful Type 6 would see action for the first time. They performed admirably, outpacing their biplane opponents in speed and completely surprising the nationalist forces encroaching upon Madrid. In their first engagement, a flight of I-16 claimed 4 enemy aircraft destroyed, and they soon began to dominate the skies over Spain wherever they went. However, this fantastic start wasn't without its problems. It was soon found that the I-16's cannons, which were fired via a cable on an already rather unstable aircraft, had a tendency to jam and were also challenging to aim. Once more, it was stated that the aircraft's armament was insufficiently powerful and that it occasionally took multiple passes to provide enough damage to bring down an enemy aircraft. It was also discovered that the I-16 was occasionally brittle. Its outstanding roll rate and maneuverability were highly lauded, as it could complete an aileron roll in approximately 1.5 seconds. However, it also enjoyed snapping its wings during said rolls, particularly when moving fast, and it detested high G spins. These were dealt with quite rapidly, particularly with the firepower difficulties. The I-16 Type 6 had an extra cannon positioned beneath the fuselage, and the even more remarkable I-16 Type 10 had 4 guns, 2 on each wing, because the wings were reinforced. It is also totally removed from the covered canopy, making it the first I-16 with the smaller windscreen installed as standard. As a result, the pilots were able to see their targets clearly and fire more bullets at them, increasing the aircraft's combat efficiency. However, this improvement was largely countered as the same period by the frighteningly huge arrival of the new German Bf 109Bs, 187 of the 276 I-16s that were deployed that had been lost by the end of the Spanish Civil War. But important lessons had also been learnt. Firepower was going to be a priority going forward, with the 4-gun at Type 10 now seen as the very minimum acceptable weapons. 2 20mm Chevat guns were added to older Type 5s to increase their firepower and increase their lethality against unarmored targets. The Battle of Khalkhin Gol in the Far East would be the first to illustrate this, but it would also mark the beginning of the I-16's obsolescence, as they were severely outclassed by the more advanced Japanese all-metal aircraft, particularly the Nakajima Ki-27. Nevertheless, the aircraft kept getting improvements and was manufactured in huge quantities. It also kept deploying improved armaments, becoming the first aircraft to take out an adversary with an air-to-air missile. When Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in the summer of 1941, an I-16 fired an unguided RS-82 rocket at a Vital 27 in August 1939. Many claim that the I-16 formed the core of the VFS. Furthermore, the numbers don't surprise you in the slightest. I-16s operated by 57 squadrons made up more than 1/3 of the Soviet Air Force at the start of the invasion. As a result, during the initial airstrikes, the I-16's bases were intensively attacked. In the first 2 days, fewer than 700 I-16s were destroyed. There were a lot of them on the ground. The primary adversary of the I-16, once it broke through the atmosphere, was the Bf 109mm series. Here we witness some of the stark differences in technologies and strategies that typified aerial warfare over the Eastern Front, particularly in the early months of the conflict. The I-16 was able to outmaneuver the 109 in roll and flat turn performance, but the 109's superior straight line speed, climb rate, and dive rates were due to its more potent engine and improved aerodynamics. This resulted in the somewhat cliched strategies of the German pilots soaring higher to launch surprise attacks, despite carrying less ammunition. The cannon-armed I-16s were able to compete with the 109s almost gun for gun, but the types with only the 4 machine guns were more frequent than the cannon-armed I-16s, and in such scenario, the German fighters had the distinctive advantage of firepower. Because of its wooden frame composition, the I-16 was also more brittle and had a propensity to catch fire and hold it when struck. The I-16 took the brunt of the German invasion's aerial wing until late 1942, when more contemporary aircraft started to replace it on the frontline duty. Remarkably, a sizable portion of them made it to retirement, which may have been due to the enormous number of units constructed during the conflict. Diverse sources contradict with each other. Because of the Soviet Union's secrecy during the Cold War and the vast amount of records that were lost or destroyed during and immediately after the Second World War, estimates of the true number of buildings vary widely, from 8,600 to 20,000. Several I-16s have survived to this day, including some that were restored to airworthy condition in the 1990s thanks to their high production number.